So we're in this last week of chasing carrots on our series on chasing things that we think will fill us up and make us happy. And so we're going to do a little cheerleading today. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, give me an S.
S.
Give me a U.
U.
Give me a C.
C.
Give me another C.
C.
Give me an E.
E.
Give me an S.
S.
Another S.
S.
And let's see if you pastor spelling me. What's that spell?
Success.
Oh, very good. This is a very bright church. Very bright church. Yeah. Success. Isn't that what we all want? Success. We remember in our culture the winners, right? Not the losers. We remember gold medal Olympians. Michael Phelps, what was it, 18 gold medals, and Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world. We don't remember the 10,000 plus Olympians that go to the Olympics every year and don't get a medal. When I think of success, I think of people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates or Oprah Winfrey or Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos, who's worth $123 billion. What's it like to wake up and look at your checkbook with that? Where do you want to eat tonight, huh? John D. Rockefeller Jr. said success is doing common things uncommonly well. Someone has said that behind every successful man, there's a woman who's surprised. Someone has also said behind every successful man, there's a woman who's exhausted. And I want to share this with you because someone sent this to me from the 9 o'clock. They said, you need to add this to it. They even sent it to me in slide formula, but I couldn't quite get it up. That says, just to prove it, there it is. Here's what it says. A successful man is one who makes more money than his wife can spend. A successful woman is one who can find such a man. There you go. Yeah. I tell you what, it's funny. Success is not just out there in the world. It's here in the church. Pastors want to be successful. That's why when a pastor meets another pastor, they say, how big's your church? Success. There's even a church with a successful name out there. It's called Winners Church. I'm not making this up. It's one of the fastest growing churches in the world. It has branches in 32 countries. Its motto and its leaders say these words: be happy, be successful, join the winners. I don't know. Something gives me an uneasy feeling about that. I went online and I was looking what would be their key verse. Every church has a key verse, right? What would be their main verse of scripture that they would say, this is what we founded the church on. And I found it. Do you want it? You ready? Here it is. For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only son to tell us how to be happy, successful, and be comfortable in life. From the book of You Wish. 3:16. That's not what it says, right, church? We should not be surprised by churches like this. More and more Christianity is being marketed like a commodity, right? That enhances your life, like toothpaste or a new automobile. If I really wanted to come up with a message that I thought would bring in more people, I would have titled this 4 Keys to Success, or How to Really Be Successful, or Free Beer Sunday. That would have brought a lot more people in here today. How many of you are for free Beer Sunday? Anyone? I already had someone at the 9 o'clock go, what Sunday is Free Beer Sunday now? I don't think they heard me. And here's what I just want to kind of illustrate this. The drive for success is ubiquitous, and it is insidious, and it's in every aspect of our lives. I'll give you an example. You ever sat down on an airplane and picked up a Sky Mall magazine and realized your life is incomplete? I had this experience recently. Last time I flew, I picked up the Sky Mall magazine. You just go on a simple flight, and they provide you with some reading material. Sky Mall magazine. I pick it up, and I realize my life is incomplete. There's some new must-haves. I began circling items like a little kid. Remember when you were a little kid and you got the Sears catalog? Remember that? Sears is all out of business now. But anyway, when we were growing up, that was the Christmas catalog, right? Circle the items you want. So you circled 3,000 of them, right? Your parents are millionaires. But here's what I circled. The first one was Darth Vader. Darth Vader toast. I mean, my life's incomplete without this. The next one, that's only $49.99. The next one, you know I'm getting this one. How much do I love cats, church? How much? The kitty cat drinking fountain for $79.99. And here's what they said. Get this so your cat doesn't have to hunch over while taking a sip of water. Because once your cat hunches over, it's all over right there. This next one, the vented microwave apple bakers with a core. Must have. Next one here, let's not forget this. I actually got this for a wedding gift. The electric beef jerky countertop food dehydrator. Because how many of us sit around and dehydrate food? And I was interested in the hair category. You think the poof happens by nature? No. It takes work to get this to do this, okay? It takes work and product. So I found something that I have to have. This is called the hair styling stand holder. This is an amazing styling hand. Holds your hair dryer, leaving both hands open for styling with brush and comb. I love what the ad said. It's the third hand you always needed. I got done circling those items, and I looked over at Renee, and I said, Renee, this catalog's got a lot of items I didn't even know I wanted. Ever notice how advertisers do that? They create a need. You're only one purchase away from being happy. The dominant message of the culture is what you don't have is what you need in order to be successful. Today, you've even got to dress for success, right? You've heard people, you got to dress for the job you want. You got to dress for success. Today, I'm wearing a Men's Wearhouse suit. I like Men's Wearhouse suits versus like Dillard's or Macy's because one, you go in there, they have someone that greets you. Two, they have people that know what they're doing. They know how to size you. When I bought this suit, I'll tell you what the salesman told me. And again, it's just how success creeps into everything. He says to me, John, and I told him I'm a preacher, right? Because I'm friends with Grant, the manager there and stuff. And he says, John, you ever buy a suit and you know you're up there preaching and your shirt just keeps coming out of your pants? It just doesn't stay where it should. You know, your shirt's just flying out. Flying out. So he whispers to me, John, what the truly successful guys wear is grippers. For a small charge, we'll add grippers to the inside of your pants so your shirts always stay tucked. So for $30 per pair of pants, sign me up for grippers. I want you to know I got grippers on. My shirt hasn't moved in 3 hours. I can't move very well either, but they're grippers. And I had people come up at the 9 o'clock, go, let me see that after the service. Let me see. If you want to touch, it's going to cost you, okay? That sounded bad. If you want to touch the grippers, forget it. We might need to not put this on the internet, so yeah. Anyway, so how many guys have grippers on today? Anyone? Any of you guys have grippers on? Show of hands? Bunch of losers. I got grippers on. I'm successful. You're not. That's how the culture works. The drive for success. Renee and I, we found this. You find this everywhere. Renee and I, when we moved to Missouri, we made a mistake. We bought a house, and don't ever do this. We bought a house that we thought we kind of liked, but we could renovate to the point where we did like. Don't do that. And I tell you why I blame it on Renee. Because it's easier to blame it on her, for one. The other thing is that Renee has made me watch a lot of shows. I mean, we have watched Property Brothers, Rehab Addict, Yard Crashers, Fixer Upper, This Old House, and my favorite, Love It or List It. We watch them. So we bought a house under the premise that we could renovate it. And if you've ever taken on any sort of home remodeling project of any size, you'll quickly discover that there's this whole underworld of people that will show up and they're very deeply passionate about things that your house must have that does not have. At every turn, there was another choice to make. And I'm talking about when we spent $30,000 on our house in Missouri, renovating it. And at the end of $30,000, we're still like, eh. Faucets, floors, tubs, tile, paint color, door trim, window stacking. If you're not careful, you can learn to become a shopper with discriminating tastes. What that means is your appetite is getting bigger and bigger for things that, in the grand scope of things, really don't matter that much. I'll give you a fine example. During the project, the $30,000 renovation, which we went over that, I'm just dumbing it down a little bit. And the reason we went over it was because the conversation I had with the general contractor, who also happened to be a salesman of skylights. You do want a skylight. We're redoing your roof. Today is a great day to put a skylight. He said, now, do you want a skylight that's fixed or do you want an electric skylight that opens with a remote? I had never thought of such things before. So I had a sneaking suspicion that the one with a remote that was electronic would cost 50% more than the other one. That was just what I thought. Renee and I talked, and Renee said, skylight's a skylight, just put the regular one in. So I meet with the contractor. He says, what'd y'all decide? I said, skylight's a skylight. We're just going to put a skylight in. And he goes like this, oh. You sure about that? Like, I just signed away my life or something. Like, yeah, is there a problem with that? It's okay if you want to. Just, you do live in Oakville, right? Well, yeah, I do live. I live in Oakville, Missouri. Yeah. Well, I mean, most people in Oakville get the electronic ones. I mean, if you want to live in St. Louis proper, yeah, they get the regular skylights, but you're in Oakville. So there I am, like a little gerbil running on the wheel. I don't want to be like the people down in St. Louis. I got to be like the Oakville people. It's like my sister lives in Austin, but she doesn't say Austin. She lives in Steiner Ranch. Have you ever been to Steiner Ranch? Where the house is just like your house here, but they charge you 3 times as much. Steiner Ranch. For real. So what do you think? You think we got the standard skylight? Show of hands. How many of you think we got the standard skylight? One person. Everybody else think we bought the electronic skylight? Of course we did. That's what you think of me. Yeah. Dumb and dumber. The guy was laughing all the way to his truck. Another electronic skylight. We used that remote like one time. Well, that's pretty cool. That's it. Never used it again. The measure of success shows up everywhere. Back in 1989, when I graduated from high school, I can't remember the name of who spoke at my commencement address, but I do remember what he said. And the reason I remember what he said was because I was concerned. He said things like this: the future of the world rests on your shoulders. He said, you alone must go out and cure disease, hunger, and poverty throughout the world, and you must find success. I remember looking over at Jack, the class clown, who couldn't even find his parents in the parked car and where he usually parked or his homework, and I'm thinking he ain't going to find success. Not only that, for those of us who planned to sleep in for a week before we went to college, I got an uneasy feeling. The speech was very depressing. For one thing, it seemed to call for a lot of work from such a small class. There was only 64 of us. We're going to solve the whole world's problems. We had no idea where to look for success, but he told us we're going to be successful. I had no idea how much success cost, or whether it came in a person or what it looked like. And so for every morning after I graduated from college, I kept up with my classmates, and we tried to figure out who had success. And sometimes it seemed like one of our classmates got successful, and then we would ask them, did you find success? And they're like, no, I'd be a lot happier if I had. And so I remember my 10th year reunion going back, and what I found was a lot of guys who were struggling in their jobs, and we talked about what kind of fertilizer we used on our lawns. And the women talked about their babies. By our 20th year reunion, it seemed like no one there was rich enough, thin enough, or important enough to qualify as successful. Truth is, I spent a lifetime the last 25 years of my ministry trying to figure out who has success. If you think about it, this quest for success actually started quite young. It all started when people asked you this question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And at that time, when they asked you that when you were just a kid, you didn't really know like salaries, right? You were just like, I want to be a cowboy, have a hat and a gun. Or a teacher, because you had a great teacher, right? Or I want to be a football player, because your hero was Terry Bradshaw or Roger Staubach. Or do you want to be a doctor or a policeman? For me, frankly, it was Spider-Man. Until I figured out he was like Santa Claus and wasn't real. That was a shocker. So you ask a kid, what do you want to be? And the kid says a cowboy. And the next day they want to be a fireman. And the next day the kid wants to be a doctor. And the question keeps chasing the kid. What are you going to be? Not just a doctor, but a surgeon. Not just a surgeon, but a skilled surgeon. Not just a successful surgeon, but one who sits on the board of directors in the hospital, one who writes books, one who leads the profession. As long as there's breath in our bodies, the thought, what more can I be, taunts us. The name of the game is success. And we either climb this ladder or we get off. What does success look like to you? If I handed you a sheet of paper and I said, write down, what is success? What would you say? Paul Harvey. I grew up listening to Paul Harvey. My dad in our 1973 AMC station wagon, we'd be listening and it'd be Paul Harvey. And he'd always say, and now the rest of the story. Paul Harvey was asked, what's the secret to success? He said, I get up when I fall down. But what does success look like to you? If you had to define it, I'm being serious. Is it a big house? Is it a big car? Is it a happy marriage? Is it happiness? Is it approval? Is it a great job? If you read the Bible, you'll find out this isn't a new problem. It was no different for the disciples. They wanted to be successful too. There were two brothers, James and John. Their nicknames were Sons of Thunder. What a nickname. And one day they went to their mom. These are grown men. Mom, can you do us a favor? Can you ask Jesus to ask a question for us, a little favor? And she agrees. And so the mom goes and kneels before Jesus. Kneels. That's a position of begging. And Jesus says, what do you want? And she says, command that these two sons of mine may sit one at the right and one at your left of your kingdom. See, she's thinking that Jesus is going to be like King David or King Solomon, and he's going to have an army, and he's going to have power, and he's going to be the ruler of the land. And so she's really saying, hey, make sure my boys are number one and number two, right by Jesus. And Jesus says, you don't know what you're asking. Oh, come on, I wanted to be like the vice president and the secretary of state. They're jockeying for cabinet positions. But Jesus' main throne is going to be a cross, not a throne or a chair. And then, so Jesus turns to James and John. He doesn't address the mom anymore. He turns to the disciples and he says, okay, you want to be successful, but are you able to drink the cup that I'm going to drink? And what cup is he talking about here? Is this the cup of riches? Is this the cup of success? No, this is the cup of suffering. Because you remember Jesus prayed in the garden in Matthew 26:39. This is before Jesus is about to be crucified. He knows what's coming. He knows what's going to happen to him. And it says, going a little further, he fell down with his face to the ground and prayed, my Father, if it's possible, may this cup be taken from me. In other words, I'm open to plan B, God. I don't want to suffer and be whipped 39 times and be humiliated and be naked and be crucified and die 5 hours suffocating to death on a cross. So I'm open to plan B. But if not as I will, but your will be done. It's the cup of death and suffering. It's the cup of salvation, his atoning death for our sins. And Jesus says, are you going to drink this cup too? Are you able to drink it? And of course, they misunderstand it. And they're like, oh, we are able. Sign us up. And Jesus says, you'll drink my cup. That's true. And they will. All but one of the disciples, Thomas, we know of, died a martyr's death for Jesus. But to sit at my right hand and my left is not mine to grant. The first thing you notice here, Jesus does not say, hey, it's wrong for you to want to be successful. It's wrong for you to have aspiration. He doesn't say that to disciples. He just says, hey, are you really understanding what success looks like for me? Surely if James and John had understood, they would have responded quite differently. From their question, however, they're clearly more concerned about their own future than they were Jesus, right? Because they're all about what positions are going to be. Where am I at in the company? To their credit, Jesus doesn't really argue with their motives. He just says not for him to decide. Now, what's funny is the other disciples hear about this little conversation with Mommy and Jesus and the two disciples, and they get mad. But they don't get mad because these two asked for the blessed places of honor. They're mad because they didn't think of it first. Oh, man. It's like calling shotgun in the car. Man, you called it first. Man. They too want the places of honor. In fact, at one time in Scripture, down the road, a little bit down the road, they're all walking ahead of Jesus and they're all having a conversation. And their conversation is this: who's going to be the greatest among the disciples? Well, I don't know. Jesus called me first. I'm probably it. You ever had a conversation with your brothers or sisters about which kid the parents love the most? Oh, I did all the time to my brother, my younger brother. Well, you know, Mom and Dad don't really love you. You're adopted, dude. I mean, they ain't told you yet, but they're going to when you get older. I mean, years of therapy I set him into, okay? My older sister, Sherry, pointed this out to me. I was like 7 years old. There are 3,000 pictures of Sherry being born. There's one of me at age 6. Chili bowl haircut. Really anorexically thin. My sister's like, see, they didn't even feed you. You're the third child. It was like they didn't even care. They didn't wash off the pacifier. They just put it back in your mouth. It's true, by the third kid, you're like, you don't care. So the disciples are arguing about who's going to be the greatest, right? Who's going to be the greatest? And Jesus catches up and Jesus overhears it. Hey guys, what are you talking about? Oh, and they try to blow it off. Oh, nothing. How about them Cowboys? And then Jesus, knowing what they're arguing, the scripture says, knowing what they're talking about, says, hey guys, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. So he's redefining success here. And then he says, hey, whoever wants to be great, okay, that's great. Whoever wishes to be great among you must first be your servant. And whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. What? This is a different success seminar. As an example, Jesus later says, oh, by the way, for me, the Son of Man, that's Jesus' title, came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So this is success. See, success for Jesus was not sitting on a throne or lording it over people who were lower than him on the socioeconomic class, because there was no one lower than him. Instead, success looked like serving. It looked like being last in line instead of first. It looked like being a servant, even a slave. So the wonderful cross that bids me come and die. But when Jesus says you need to die to yourself, he's always talking about the lesser self. And the lesser self is that greedy, I want to be successful self, versus I want to leave a legacy. I think it's true, you can be too big for God to use, but you can never be too small. To be successful in God's eyes, you got to see yourself as a servant. Jesus Christ, the most successful person who ever lived, entered this world as a humble servant. And again, Jesus didn't rebuke the disciples' desire for success. It's not wrong to want to be successful. But he redefined what success is about. It's interesting, there's a book called Halftime by Bob Buford, and he talks about how the first half of your life you spend trying to be successful, making money, getting a good career, getting a good job, blah, blah, blah. But he said by the time you reach 50, most people shift over into not success, but significance and trying to make a difference. So the question is not how successful we are. The question is, are we faithful in our service to Christ? Scriptures tell us that Christ was successful because he was faithful unto death. Unto death. Remember the movie that came out years ago by Mel Gibson, The Passion of Christ? Anyone seen this movie? It's a great, great movie. I love this movie for a lot of reasons. But of course, it's violent and brutal because it depicts Jesus' violent and brutal death. And a lot of people criticize the movie because it's so violent and brutal. I remember one time I had arranged for our youth group to watch the film. And I had a church person come up to me and now, you're not going to show the original version, are you? You're going to show the edited version, right, where they take out all the violence and brutality? And I said, no, we're going to show the original because the edited version gives the impression that Jesus was sentenced to community service. Pick up the trash, come on. So I do a lot of funerals. I've done thousands of funerals. And I'm always faced with this, the value of a life at the end of the life. And people gather around and they wonder, what do we say about this person? And some funerals are tougher than others. But at funerals, we don't talk about success or resume virtues. Resume virtues are, hey, I'm proficient in these skills and give me the job and I'll do this. We talk about eulogy virtues like, did they love? Did they serve? Did they give? So it's helped me doing funerals to give you two kinds of successes that people have. There is success that dies with a person, and there is success that outlives a person. And you're not going to like this next part. And this next part, I don't usually share at funerals. But for most people, life's a draw. They leave the world pretty much the same as it was when they came into it. They live, they work, and they die. And the world's really no better, no worse for them having been here. They're nice people, perhaps. Just that they didn't make any lasting impression. No lasting contribution. They survived, and it's like, how many years did they survive? But no more. It's really refreshing when somebody comes along and who's satisfied with not just getting by. So if you were to die today, what have you done that will outlive you? That won't die with you. Now, according to the world's definition, Jesus was not a success. I mean, think about it. Born in an obscure village in a cave, grew up as a Jewish person, one of the most hated minorities in the world, grew up a poor carpenter, owned no palaces, no chariots, no property, had no money, no 401k, no life insurance, no medical insurance, no political power. In fact, he was killed by political powers. And what did Jesus do all day? Teaching, healing, serving, forgiving. That's a successful day. He had no upper crust friends. Jesus hung out with poor shrimpers from Ingleside. Fishermen, tax collectors, prostitutes from Leopard Street. That was his crowd. Homeless people. And how did his life end? Like a common criminal. The Romans killed thousands of people by crucifixion. Thousands. It was just another day when they killed Jesus and two other common criminals. Yet no one has greater success in terms of legacy and love. Because they think Jesus Christ was a failure. It looked like he was a failure. When he was being crucified, the crowd mocked him and said, if you're the Son of God, save yourself. And it looked like he was a failure. But 3 days later, when that stone was rolled aside and Jesus came up out of the grave, it was all different then. And he conquered death. I don't know. I put that on your resume, conquer death. Well, that's pretty good. You're hired. He beat hell and the grave. He beat the darkness until it bled light. And he made a way for you and me to have redemption, forgiveness, abundant life here and now, eternal life. And so he bids me to come and die so that I might find I can truly live, not under the world's definition of success, but under a whole different definition of success, one that will outlive me. I'll give you a little history. Are you still awake? Say amen. Amen. This is really, really important. Because you hear scriptures like where Jesus says, let the children come to me. When it comes to children, Jesus changed the world. And I'm not making this up. This is well documented. Authors like Rodney Starks and historians like other people have written all kinds of books. A great book you ought to read is The Rise of Christianity. Just a few examples. In the ancient world, children were routinely left out to die of exposure, particularly if they were the wrong gender. You can guess what gender that is. Or they were sold into slavery. Jesus was the first rabbi that came along and said, this is not right. They believed that children didn't have souls until they were adults. Jesus said, no. Children have souls. And so Jesus' treatment and teachings about children led to the forbidding of those practices, as well as the first orphanages and godparents were created. Gregory of Nyssa in the 3rd century said, from now on, every monastery will have an orphanage. And if you find a baby that's abandoned, if you can't take care of that baby as a Christian, you take it there and they will take care of that baby. That's when orphanages were founded and created, 3rd century. This is your DNA. This is your heritage as Christians, to care for children. People think, why do we have a school? Why do we have a school? Well, we have a school because it helps raise funds for the church. That's what some people say. It sounds good if you're making money. But the reason we have a school, because love of learning led to monasteries. Monasteries became the cradle of academics. Universities like Cambridge and Oxford and Harvard all began as Jesus-inspired efforts to love God with one's mind. The first legislation, you know why we have a school? Look at the history of the colonies. Jamestown, remember that? The 13 colonies? Remember that in school? You're like, oh, I hate this. Right? But those 13 colonies, came up with the first ever legislation, and it was Christian-based legislation to make sure that every child would learn something, and it was called the Old Deluder Satan Act, under the notion that God does not want any child ignorant, because that old deluder, Satan, would delude you into thinking education is not important. So when your kids go, I hate school, man. It's a waste of time. I'm like, no. Learn to use your mind. It's a gift. The ancient world loved education, but the ancient world said education is for the elite. Jesus said, no, it's for children. The notion that every child bore God's image helped fuel the move for universal literacy so that everyone can read. Renee's got a second grader in her class. He doesn't want to read. So I told her, I said, does he like his cell phone? She's like, he's on his cell phone all the time. I'm like, well, teach him how to read by texting to him. So now she's doing this new strategy where he wants to text Renee. Another man is texting Renee. All hours of the night. Who is it? Vincente? Yeah, okay. You can teach kids how to read by texting. Jesus had a universal concern for those who suffered. Do you know the church grew the most during the Great Plagues? The 2 Great Plagues, they wiped out most of Europe. Because Christians took in, when family members were like, you're going to the curb, you're sick, they kicked them out of the street. Christians took them into their home. That cost them their life. They got the plague because Jesus said, care for those who are sick. The church exploded during that time. Because people were like, man, these people are serious. They're being successful. Jesus had compassion, and it led to the institutions for lepers. and the beginning of modern-day hospitals. The Council of Nicaea decreed that wherever a cathedral exists, there must be a hospice, or what you call a hospital today, a place for the caring for the sick and the poor. You ever notice all the Christian names that hospitals have? You think that's just a coincidence? Hello? This is your DNA. So you can be successful all you want. And you can climb the ladder and find out the ladder was on the wrong wall. And the problem with spending your life climbing the ladder is you go right past Jesus because he's coming down. Go ahead and get excited now and say amen. Somebody, I know. Again, the question we often try to answer is, what do we want to be when we grow up? But a better question is, what does God want me to be when I grow up? True success depends on whether who we are measures up to the kind of man or woman that God created us to be. And the biblical definition of success is to be a person that God desires you to be and accomplish things that God desires you to accomplish. I was flipping around the TV the other night, and sometimes God speaks through movies. You ever notice that? And I came across a great old movie, one of my favorite movies, Field of Dreams. And I came across this great scene. And it spoke to me, and it's perfect for the message. The main character, of course, in the field goes to a small town to find Archie Graham, a character based on a real-life baseball player. He had a highly successful minor league career with the Charlotte Hornets of North Carolina, and Archibald Wright Graham made his major league debut in June 29th with the New York Giants. He got to play one inning in the outfield as a major leaguer, and he didn't even get up to bat. He left baseball after one inning and spent his life in Kansas as a small-town doctor. Didn't make a lot of money, wasn't real successful in the world's eyes, just a small-town doctor. Kevin Costner, of course, plays the lead character in the movie, commented to Dr. Graham that Graham's baseball career and lifelong dream of playing in the major leagues had only lasted 5 minutes, and that would be considered a tragedy. And Dr. Graham replied, "Son, if I only got to be a doctor for 5 minutes, now that would have been a tragedy." That's a true story. Archie Graham had his priorities in order. It's funny when you look at the word success, did Jesus ever even use that term, successful? Come follow me and I'll make you successful. The closest word Jesus uses to success is actually the word blessed. And he says things like, blessed are the peacemakers. You ever met a peacemaker? They are spiritually mature. They are the people that are quick to listen, slow to get angry, and quick to love. They have the fruit of the Spirit. They have wisdom. They have great discernment. They walk into a room and the room changes. Peacemakers. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Jimmy Carter. Those are people that were peacemakers. And then my wife, Renee. As you all know, in the animal family, Renee is a turtle. Small but mighty, strong outward shell, sometimes a snapping turtle, but mostly a nice turtle. Honestly, Renee's a lot more like Jesus than I am. She's next to Jesus, she's my role model. I want to be like her. She's a peacemaker. She's a bridge builder. She walks into a room and if conversation is negative and biting and sarcastic, it will change automatically. It's this true story. The first time I went to Renee's house to eat dinner with her family, it was just bizarre because I came from a family of gorillas. If we weren't cutting someone down in my family or being sarcastic, someone had died. That's it. Or was near death. This is Renee's family. We're all sitting down. Would you please pass the salt? Why, certainly. Thank you for asking. Here's the salt. Would you like some pepper? Oh, yes, some pepper would be lovely. Thank you for thinking of me and providing the pepper. Would you like another napkin? Oh, thank you. This is my family. Hey, man, quit hogging the salt. Gosh, you're supposed to cut back anyway. Come on, pass it over here. First time I had dinner with Renee, at the end of the meal, I'm like, okay, y'all can cut the bit. It's okay. Y'all can cut it out right now. And they're like looking at me all like, and Renee's like, this is the way my family is. And then when Renee met my family the first time, I had to say to her, this is the way my family is. There are two kinds of people. There's the thermometer and thermostat. Now, what's the thermometer do? The thermometer adjusts to the climate of the room. Thermostat sets the climate of the room. Jesus says, blessed are the thermostats. Blessed are the ones that can walk in a situation and change the climate because they're so full of God. Another question around success is, will the world be a better place because I've been here? Will you leave the world? And when you leave the world, and you will you leave behind a legacy of love? It's interesting, in 1963, Howard Zinn was fired from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. His major crime was participating with Martin Luther King Jr. in civil rights. What a criminal. To want everyone to be treated equally, regardless of their skin color, can you imagine? So the university fired him for that. 42 years later, in May of 2005, the university said, we made a mistake. We would like Dr. Zinn to return to address the graduates of Spelman College. So he came back to address them after being fired from the university. You can watch this on YouTube. I have. And I loved his speech. In his address, he challenged them to think differently than our society does about the good life. I'm going to share with you just a bit of his speech. He said, I know you have practical things to do, to get jobs and get married and have children. You may become prosperous and be considered success in the way our society defines success, by wealth and standing and prestige. But that's not enough for a good life. Remember Tolstoy's story, The Death of Ivan Lynch, he continued. A man on his deathbed reflects on his life, how he's done everything right. He's obeyed the rules, became a judge, married, had children, and he's looked upon as a success. Yet in his last hours, he wonders, why do I feel like a failure? That answer is that it's not enough to keep the rules and be respectable. What are you doing for the common good? What are you doing to take up the cross of Jesus Christ? After becoming a famous novelist, Tolstoy himself decided this was not enough, that he must speak out against the treatment of Russian peasants, that he must write against war and militarism. I love this speech. To be truly successful, we're to serve Christ as Christ served, and love as Christ loved, and forgive as Christ forgave. Jesus wouldn't talk about success this way. He would say things like, blessed are the peacemakers. Or if you want to be something when you grow up, be the light. You're the light of the world. Can you imagine Jesus saying, you're the light of the world to poor shrimpers at Ingleside, to the prostitutes on Leopard Street, to the homeless disciples that were following Jesus? You're the light of the world. Talk about a statement of faith. They must have looked around and gone, okay, me? Light of the world? Yeah, and you're going to change the world. You're the light of the world. Here's what's even more absurd. Jesus says that you're the light of the world. You. We're the light of the world. Go ahead, turn to your neighbor and say it. Yep, you're the light of the world. Now, how many of you are nervous about the darkness? In chapel time with the school, it's the first song the kids learn to sing, and they love to sing it. It's the first song I ever sang when I was in Sunday school. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. You know the part the kids really like? When we go, hide it under a bushel. No! They love to be loud and jump up and shout no with that part. No! And I often look out and they're all screaming and yelling, and it's okay to do that in the house of God. I'm raising up loud Presbyterians. I love it. How will people see the light? Through your good works. Are you going to let it shine? The German atheist philosopher Nietzsche, who I read, once said, if he saw more redeemed people, he might be more inclined to believe in their Redeemer. Christians who do not have changed lives have a credibility gap. If I am telling you while I'm coughing and about to die how great my doctor is, you might get a different doctor. That's okay, I got my own, thanks. Or if I tell you, hey, I'm broken down over here on 35, can you come pick me up? And man, my auto mechanic does a great job with my car. You might want to try a new mechanic. What good does it do to tell people how great Jesus is if they can't see it in your life? Credibility gap. If you're the light of the world, it means, you got a responsibility for the world. Oh, man. It's not just this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine for me. I'm going to let it shine for the world. A lighthouse steers ships away from the rocks. A light bulb lights up the room. Light does not exist for its own glory, but to brighten up the world. It's interesting, the moon has light, but it's just reflective of the sun's light. Like you and I, we just reflect the sun's light.